Okay, so you've probably up until this point asking yourself, well, David, I've learned pentatonic scales and they work just fine when I play over a blues chord. And they probably do to a certain degree, but the problem is learning a pattern like a pentatonic scale, like in the case of this, a G minor pentatonic, you're kind of missing some of the notes that you should be playing over the chords. But what I would say is I'm going to show you how you can take the information you already have and add a few things to it to embellish and actually take the concept to the next level. So in the case of the pentatonic scale, I'm going to show you from the top here, going down, how you can add a couple of chord tones. So the pattern's going to be this. Instead of playing your pattern like you normally do, we're going to do this. We're going to start here on the G, and we're going to go, instead of playing the F, we're going to play the E. And then we're going to move the pattern down like this. When we get to the third string, instead of going down here to the B flat, I'm going to put the B in there. Why? Because the B, there's our tritone, is a chord tone that we want to have. So we have... Now that's probably a pattern that you haven't used, and it's very easy to see where it comes from. Starting up here. And a lot of times in playing a blues chord or a dominant 7 chord, you can actually take that note, that B flat, and hammer on to the chord tone. That's part of what I haven't spoken about yet, is the dialect. Every music that we have has certain dialects to it. There's different types of blues dialects, there's different types of jazz dialects. Just like there are in languages. If you go across the country of the United States, there's many different dialects, and there's different pronunciations. You go to England, there's many different dialects. If you learn a foreign language like German or French, there's many dialects within the countries. So in the case of music, we have to think about the dialect. And what I think is very important is whatever you play, if you're trying to get an idea of a certain kind of dialect that you like, get as many examples as you possibly can. But by the same token, get some other dialects that use the same vocabulary and see how they are similar and how they are different. So in the case of this thing here, the pentatonic pattern is starting up here on the G, and we're not going to go to the F, we're going to go down here to the E, which is the 13. In fact, when you do this, take a look at the chord shape that I have here. All those chord shapes that we talked about and how they relate to those single notes. So whenever you play a pattern, whatever it is that you've learned, try to find the tones that are part of the chord in there. The next one, example 2, is using that same thing again, but we're going to now incorporate more of the pentatonic pattern that you know by putting the F in there, because the F is actually a chord tone. It's the flat 7. So now we go down here to the C, but we're going to put the B in there. You can still use this over that G7. The reason you can use that B flat is because that would be the sharp 9. That's like the Jimi Hendrix chord we talked about, having that sound. But what makes the blues very unique and what makes those sounds very interesting is the fact that you have that tension between that note here and that note here. That's very bluesy. Now that's a dialect. If you're going to play that kind of bluesy sound over a blues, that's reverting back to the more blues kind of dialect. Whereas in jazz, they tend to use more chromatics and more chord tones and more arpeggiated kinds of lines. But you can combine them. Nobody says you have to play one specific dialect over a type of music. Like I said, get as many as you possibly can. Now the third example here is going to go up here to the on the 8th fret, and this is based on the pentatonic that you know. Right, still the G minor pentatonic, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to play these top notes, and I'm going to go to this note. I'm going to play that note instead. Hear the chord? In fact, here's the tritone. And that's a very common line in the blues, just based on the fact that I'm using that B flat to the B, which is coming off your pentatonic. but I added one note, the chord tone. And if you look at the interval that we had before in the previous lessons, I have also the shape here, which is B diminished, the triad. And right next to it is a G major. And that's not a coincidence that they're right next to each other like that. There's a reason why those notes come from where they come. It's kind of like this. You want to think of the lines that I'm playing coming out of the chords are like snow melting into water. And the water is flowing, that's your line, and the snow is your chord. The last example here is up here at the 10th fret. And again, I'm going to use these notes from the pentatonic to the 12th fret. And now what I'm going to do here is move down all pentatonics, but my last note is right here, is the chord tone. And there's the, whoops, there's your tritone. So again, it's this. So now what you're doing is you're actually, when you play that pentatonic pattern, you're going to resolve on that chord tone. And my suggestion is to play it and find the tritone as your focus point of where you want to resolve on. And these things will integrate themselves into your playing. But my biggest piece of advice is when you do things like this, if it's new for you and adding that new note is a little cumbersome, take some time to visualize the note, maybe while you're driving, listening to music, or if you have a rehearsal with your guys, maybe tape yourself playing over that progression and play, or in your practice time. Listen to it in the car or wherever you're at and visualize that note that you want to add to it. And believe me, if you visualize it, you'll be able to play it. That's the most important thing.